What does a small town remember? What does it conceal? And how do love, ambition, secrecy, and reputation shape the stories people tell about one another? Welcome to Reading the World. I'm Ali Al Hadji, and today I'm speaking with novelist Susan Gooch about fiction, place, family, scandal, and what it means to write the lives that are always being interpreted by a community around them. This is Reading the World, a podcast about literature, culture, and higher education as ways of understanding how meaning is made. At the center of the show is a simple question. What does it mean to read the world? Not only to read books, but to interpret the structures through which life becomes legible. Language, memory, place, power, silence, desire, and the narratives people inherit about themselves and about others. My guest today is Susan Gooch, author of The Carrington Affairs and The Non-Negotiable. What interests me about Susan's work is that it returns to the small town not merely as a setting, but as a social world, one in which people are known through family, history, rumor, loyalty, aspiration, and secrecy. Her novels move through romance, public life, private ghost, and the difficult work of understanding another person beyond the story already told about them. Susan, welcome to Reading the World.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I think what you just said it beautifully, because that is very much encapsulates what my novels are about. And I don't know if you know this, but they are set in my actual hometown.
It's wonderful to have you here. I'd love to begin with place because your fiction seems deeply rooted in it. The small town, yes. Your novels return to Circe, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. No?
No.
How do you pronounce?
Okay, so this is how we know if you call us and you say Circe, we know you are not from Circe, Arkansas. It is Circe.
Circe.
You got to get that southern accent going a little bit.
Okay. Circe. What does the small town make possible for you as a novelist? What is it about that setting, socially, emotionally, narratively, that keeps drawing you back?
Well, for me, first of all, I mentioned earlier that one of my favorite writers is William Faulkner. And he is a Southern writer, and I am a Southern girl. I take a lot of pride in being a Southerner. And for me, it's almost like a snow globe, that beautiful scene that you shake up inside of a snow globe. And it sort of stops it in time. And for me, living in a small town, I've lived in this town for 25 years. I actually moved to this little town. I wasn't born here. I'm a native Tennessean, but we moved from London, England. And when we moved here in this tiny little town, I saw all the things I wanted for my children to grow up. It's almost sometimes in these towns, these tiny Southern towns, like time stopped. And all the good things about how I grew up are here. But the community is so important. You talked about family. That is still, in the big cities, I think sometimes families can be together, but in a small town, all three of my children grew up here. They all graduated from the same high school that I taught at. They all moved back here and are raising their families here. So part of that is our city. It's how our city works. It's a beautiful little community. We have fabulous opportunities. We have great education. Even if it's a public education, it's a great education. And we have teachers that care and that really try, and people care about each other. And something too about a small town is everyone knows each other. And,
Yes,
if they
exactly
like you, if they care about you, if you care about them, if your lives are connected, and in a small town they often are, they keep your secrets. They keep your secrets.
I see.
If you're going to expose other people, you expose yourself. And I think there's a certain currency of that in a small town, that people protect each other. That is something that I definitely feel, having lived here for 25 years, that there is a level of protection that my children, we all enjoy. And we offer that to others in our community. And I think
That's great.
that's something that maybe you don't get. And I'm saying, when I
And in a
lived in,
city, big cities, yeah,
I've lived in Dallas, you don't even know your neighbors next door in a small
exactly.
town.
I know.
I cannot go to town and go to, I don't know if you know what Walmart is. We have a Walmart here, the
Yeah, of
grocery
course.
store, uh, out to lunch. I'm going to see someone that I've either taught
Hmm.
with,
Hmm.
taught, taught all their kids. I've taught thousands of students over the years in this little community. And, when you only have 4,000 students in the whole district, K-12, you're going to have brothers and sisters. You're going to know their families. They're going to know you. And that's partly why I retired because when my book came out, I knew that it's a little bit of a racy book. I'll be honest about that. And I just didn't
Okay.
want to be teaching in the classroom and people saying, Miss Gooch, tell me about your book, because that wasn't the appropriate place at a lower elementary or grade school. This is for adults. It's not for children. It's not dirty, but do you know what I'm saying? And so in a community, and I think too, the people in my community have loved the positive way I've shown us, so that I
Yes.
show that our community cares about each other. The whole idea of shop local, shop each other, take care of each other, local universities, local churches. And that, I think that's all very much a part of my novel and
Yes.
who I am as a person.
Yes, and I think that's exactly what makes small towns so narratively powerful also. They don't just, you know, hold people, they remember them
Yes.
and contain them. So, one of the things that interests me about small town fiction is that people are never read neutrally. They are read through family, history, gossip, old loyalties, social standing, sometimes even before they speak. Did that matter to you as you built this world? Were you consciously write in a place where interpretations is already happening all the time?
I don't know that I made that conscious decision originally when I was writing the book, but it's definitely embedded because, the book starts off in a country club. I actually live on the Cersei Country Club. My house backs up to it. So I live on the course. And here's something that's maybe unique about a small town versus a big city. In a small town, you can afford to be a part. The cost of living is so much lower. The housing is lower. You're not paying for a good education because your kids are getting it for free. You can be a part of activities that you wouldn't have access to in a large city. You might not could afford it. And so I have been a member of that country club for 25 years. I have been at parties there. I have thrown, like in the book, they talk about the sleigh ride soiree, which they do for charity. I have thrown that party for years with 200 and 300 people coming to my house to raise money for charity for kids in foster care. So that is something that I know that world. And I truly believe you write what you know, because then it will be, you will know the nuances of the life that you can embed where it's obvious when someone doesn't know what they're talking about. For example, Taylor is a teacher. I'm a teacher. Um, my mother was an artist, Poppy's an artist. So I wrote about worlds that I intimately know. So what you just mentioned, this idea of them having that layer of protection and also that layer of community, I already know what's expected there. I also know, how do you dress there? How do you interact there? What do they eat and drink there? I didn't have to go research that. I already knew that. I know what that means. We have a joke here. It's called being an outfit repeater. Do you know what that means? It's like if there's a
No,
party, okay, if there's a party, people will remember what you wear. Now you can wear the same outfit again, but you have to change something. You know what I'm saying?
I see.
It's all
Okay.
about being seen and how you present yourself. There's a lot of that. And so we have a joke. Oh, you don't want to wear the same little black dress 3 times in a row to a party. You can wear the same dress, but you got to wear different shoes. So that the fact that I would know that, you might not know that if you don't live in a small town. Because in a big city, you don't see the same people at every party. In a small town, you see the same people at every party.
Exactly. I also want to ask about affection and honesty. Right in a place one loves can be complicated. There is a temptation either to idealize it or to reduce it to its tensions. How do you balance those things as a writer? How do you write a place with care while still allowing its pressures, silences, and judgments?
Well, I think, you mentioned the word earlier, the silence. Sometimes in a small town, silence can be the loudest sound in the room. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're at one of those parties and you have been ostracized because you've had an affair or you've done something within the community. Okay. And everyone it's almost like an 18th century British cut. People, they would cut you if you were at the ton and they didn't speak to you, you were kind of out. It's not to that level, but it kind of is. And so, even to that, those silences within that. And I have a term for that. It's called playing nicely in the sandbox. If you're going to be successful in any small town, in my opinion, or any community, you have to learn to play nicely in the sandbox. It doesn't mean that everybody in the sandbox is your best friend, but it means you respect their position in the sandbox and their place. And so for me, when I'm writing in a small town, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to respect the different groups, which we have here. We have different socioeconomic groups. We have different, and one of my characters is very wealthy. One is the daughter of the housekeeper. There is still some of that, maybe we don't speak about it. It's 2026. Nobody cares. Nobody cares ish. Nobody cares ish. And so I think that there is sometimes the silence of that judgment of how we're judging people. And just like, and I think that's included because I think that is a part of a small town where, again, if you're in a big city, you can live so much more anonymously and you don't care that people are judging you because you're not feeling that backlash on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Where in
Yes.
a small town, you will.
And that leads very naturally into the Carrington affairs, because that novel seems deeply interested in what a community knows, what it hides, and what happens when what has been hidden begins to surface. In the Carrington affairs, you bring together politics, romance, family history, and scandal. What struck me is that scandal here is not just a dramatic event, it's also a crisis of interpretation. Once the past starts to emerge, everyone has to reread what they thought they knew. When you began writing this novel, what first interested you most? The emotional story, the public scandal, the family system, or the political setting?
Definitely the emotions, the feelings, but it's because I come at it from a female perspective. I think we always come at it from the feelings, and that when you think about one thing you probably should know is that when I wrote this book beginning in 2012,
Mhm.
I wrote all summer. My daughter was in Europe in law school, and we're very, very close, and I was going to be very sad. So I decided that I would take my summer break and I would write a novel. And I wrote it for me. I didn't write it to be published or anything else. I just wrote it for me. And I just started thinking about these characters, and I thought, how would I feel if I were in the club and someone, because I am married to my high school sweetheart. We have been married almost 40 years, and he would never betray me that way, never. But how would I feel if I were betrayed that way? And I will tell you that at that point in my life, many of my friends were. Their husbands were having affairs. They were finding out, and they were finding out in very public ways in that same country club. Maybe not in the same, the story's all fiction, but a lot of the same parallels were going on in my friends' lives. So those thoughts were already sort of percolating in my head. And I don't know how you write, but my writing process is I think the whole story out before I write a single word. I get the whole thing. The whole novel is
Kind of a messy writer.
well, I
I
get it.
start with, yeah.
Go ahead,
Go
what?
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I would say I write the scenes down. That's what I would do. I would think about it. I would just think about it, think about it, think about it. And then I made list of what was this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. And so when the first draft that I wrote, I just really focused on Taylor and Greer. And I didn't
Mhm.
really focus. I knew that Poppy and Bennett would have their story, and I thought it would be two separate books. At the end of that summer, I actually took a job in administration and I just put the book away. but I had been sending it to my daughter through email. So in 2023, I was stuck in an airport, like many people are today. And I kept downloading books, trying to find something to read. I was with 3 of my girlfriends, and it was a 6-hour layover. And in 6 hours, I could probably read 3 or 4 books. So, I mean, I was hungry for something good to read and
Yes.
couldn't find anything. And I looked at my friend Jenny and I said, I wrote a book that was better than all this. And she said, You wrote a book? I've known you for 25 years. I didn't know you wrote a book. And so I said, Yeah, it's in my email. So we pull it up, and everybody with us is in this airport. My 4 friends, we're all reading my book. And they look at me and they say, Suze, there's something here. You got to write this. But I knew that in 2023, social media was so different. What had happened in 2012, you couldn't set that story in 2023. The social media would have exposed those secrets. So I had to figure out how to go back and put it in 2012 to protect the secrets, because the story doesn't work if everything blows up the first day. And so I spent 6 months rethinking the story. And then I sat down and wrote the book and published in March of 2024. So some of what you're talking about, I just sort of, I was living it and I knew it, but I don't know that I was consciously deciding it. Does that make sense? Now that what you're talking about, now that I write every day and I
Yes.
am working on newer things, and I think my writing skills have gotten better because I write every day, I do
Yes.
more intentional thinking. Is it from what do I want them to feel? And B, what are the politics of this situation? Because I think there is politics in all situations. There's
Yes.
politics everywhere. Politics is a part of life. And if you say you don't like politics, well, no one likes it. We have to, again, that's the sandbox, the politics of the sandbox. How do we make our life work with other people and be successful together? And so for me now as a writer, I am much more cognizant of all that. But
Hmm.
before, I think I was just in the emotion and letting the story happen.
I see. Okay, great. I want to stay with secrecy for a moment, because secrecy in fiction is rarely just about withholding information. It shapes people, it distorts relationships, it creates emotional weather. How did you think about secrecy in this novel? Is it primarily destructive, or were you also interested in the ways silence can feel protective, even when it becomes costly?
Again, I don't know that I could have articulated it in 2023 when I was writing this book, or in 2012 when I was writing this book. Today, I 100% agree with you, because I do think, even as parents, there are times I do not tell my children everything because I'm protecting them from what I'm not telling. When you have adult children and they find out there's things maybe you didn't tell them, they feel betrayed. So it is a double-edged sword. The more sometimes we try to protect those that we love with our silence or with knowledge we think will hurt them, sometimes we hurt them more. And in the third novel, it's called, that I've just finished, it's actually at my editor's now in the series, it's called The Dirty Birds Book Club. And
Okay,
it
great.
also brings out a lot of secrets. And
I look forward to reading it.
they really do I did just what you said. And I did a lot of foreshadowing and because now I understand as a writer, because one thing you don't understand until you really write a novel is every word counts. Like, don't waste your words. If you want someone to feel something, write the words, they'll feel it. But if you mention that somebody has, I'm making this up off the top of my head, has a overbite, it needs to have a purpose. It's not just to get the image. I mean, it might be just to get the image, but probably something needs to happen with that overbite. Or if they have I wrote this yesterday, for example. The person they hear them snoring and they sound like, they called it a hawking geese, but it's because they have a deviated septum. But they remember back 25 years before when they were hit in the nose and their nose was broken. So I tie the past and the present together. For me, that's kind of what we're talking about here. And some of that silence, when I have a character that is protecting someone, I have to plant enough seeds that the reader has some questions in their mind, even if they don't realize it. Why are they telling me this? Why is my narrator or my writer telling me this? What do I need to know in the future? And then when you make that connection, it just makes the words pop off the page for me as a reader and a writer.
Great. And finally, on this book, Were you consciously asking readers to revise their sympathies as they moved through the story, to move away from easy judgment and toward something more difficult?
Absolutely. One of the things that I find so interesting is, and I've heard this probably 100 times. Halfway through the book, I was Team Taylor. I couldn't stand Poppy. I didn't like her. I didn't like anything about her. And then they go, and then I read her story, and now I don't know. Now I'm maybe Team Poppy. And what I want people to understand is, especially in a small town, but in all life, it is a 360. But you can only see the direction you're looking at. You cannot see behind you until you turn around and look the other direction. And we have to hold a mirror up to our lives. And there are so many situations, if we would stop and let ourselves communicate and talk to people and experience each other's position, it would change everything. It would erase our biases. It would change how we feel about them. As an educator, I will tell you that for me, I saw something in the news this week that our first lady is bringing out this humanoid robot that's going to teach kids. And I thought, that's not going to work. That's not going to work because education and learning is built on relationships. You're not going to get that through a robot. You may get the knowledge. You can get that from the computer right here in front of me. What you cannot get, that deep-seated learning that comes from that human connection. And in my
Yes.
book, I wanted people to get that human connection that Taylor and Poppy and Bennett and Greer. And here's another thing. A lot of people don't like Greer. They think he's overbearing and hateful and dismissive of her at the beginning. But it's just what you just said. He's protecting her. He wants to take care of her. He doesn't want Bennett and Poppy's mess, if you will, to spew onto his family. He's doing his role as a family. And I loved the fact that, you kind of picked up on that as you move through the book, how you feel about them is different. Where's your sympathy? Do you feel bad for the wife that's cheated on, or do you feel bad for the girlfriend who thought she got cheated on? And, you've had and then what about the fact she's hid a child from him all these years? I mean, he just gave that. I don't know that I would forgive that so quickly. But
Yes.
again, she was protecting her child. In her mind, she was protecting her child. So I think sometimes our biases blind us so much to reality because perception is reality, but it is not reality.
That movement from judgment toward a more demanding understanding seems to continue in the non negotiable, though in a different key.
Yes.
Yes. The non
Yes.
negotiable is such a strong title because it suggests that love is never only emotional. It also raises questions of principle, selfhood, vocation, and limits. What did that title open up for you as a writer? What became visible once you started thinking in terms of the non negotiable?
Well, I will tell you that, let me tell you how that book came about. So my little 82-year-old mama read the Carrington Affairs, okay? And when I say Southern Baptist, still married to my daddy for 62 years, a school teacher for 40 something years. When she read it, she had a couple of comments. I won't tell you those. But the main one she said was, "You've written a book about people that get divorced. Could you write a book about people that stay married?" And I said, "Okay, Mama, I'll work on that." And so I did. I just started thinking about it. And there's so much in this book that comes out of my own life because like I told you, I met my husband on a blind date at 16. I was engaged the day I graduated from high school. We went to college together. He's 4 years older than I am. I got married at 20 years old. I had my daughter at 22. When I graduated from college, I thought, I'm going to law school. I'm going to have this big career. I'm going to do all these things. And I found out pretty quickly that you have to have priorities and you have to choose and you can't have everything. Nobody gets everything. You have to figure out what's your non-negotiable. For me, I was never going to leave my husband. He was never going to leave me. So we could only have one career. So it had to be his career. So I literally followed him all over the world. All over the world. I told you I lived in London. I drugged 3 kids with me. I knew that when he was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, those kids were me. I was taking care of those kids. I was taking care of the house. When we first moved to this little town, I moved by myself. He stayed in Europe. I built the house. I got my kids in school. And I learned that marriage and love is not a feeling, because love does this. Okay.
Mhm.
It's a roller coaster. There are good days in a marriage and there are bad days. But if you just give up, you never get the good again. You just don't. And I don't care and I have friends if, they give up and they remarry and they give up and they remarry. And guess what happens? You just bring the same problems into the new marriage.
Mhm.
And for me, that was sometimes you have to stop and you have to reprioritize that person and you have to honor them. You have to honor what they care about, what they love. For my husband, it's golf. He is a huge avid golfer. And so, at some point I used to be so mad as a young wife. I've worked, you've been gone all week and you've been traveling and now I've had these 3 kids and now it's weekend and you're gone. But he was exhausted and he needed a break. Had to learn to honor him with that break. So I think I wanted, and here's the thing, they're both so stinking smart in this book. They have their futures planned out. They can have everything, but can they really? And they have to work together. If they really want each other, they gotta compromise. And I think sometimes it feels like in this world we've forgotten how to compromise.
Yes, I'm very interested in the relationship between intimacy and ambition. Fiction often treats love and ambition as if one must cleanly absorb the other, but lived life is rarely that simple. Was that tension central to this novel? Not only whether two people love each other, but what kind of life that love asks them to build and what it may ask them to relinquish.
One of the best quotes about family that I have ever heard is, if you love your child, love their mama, love their daddy. If you love your child, love their daddy, love their mom, because loving our kids is easy, right? Like that's instinctive. That comes to us. And sometimes once they have a child, because as long as they didn't have a child, they could continue to move, if you will, paths that would do this. They could come and go away from each other. They could have gone to different schools, whatever. Now, here's the thing when you're doing that. When you're apart, you still have to make the other person a priority. I mean, my husband traveled all the time. I told you, I never worried about him cheating on me. I don't. I know I'm a priority. Even if I'm on this side of the country and he's on another part of the country or the world, we're still connected to each other. But when you have a child, you have to go this way. You have to prioritize that child. So that means that both of your lives are moving in the same direction. So sometimes it has to look like this. You can't both go in different ways, because who takes care of the child? What happens to the child if you don't do that? And for me, having had a child at 22 years old, having 3 by the time I was 28, and listen, the greatest love of my life is having been their mother. It's the greatest gift is to get to be their mother. Today, I'm still their mother. They all live here. I have 4 granddaughters. We are intimately involved in each other's lives. They are still my non-negotiable. I'm going to be with them. I'm going to talk to them every day. But I feel like those are some lessons that I learned. And so when I wrote this book, I knew, and it's so interesting to me, because this book appeals more to a middle-aged group of women usually. This
Mhm.
book, it kind of is focused more to young people. And it's
I
almost
see.
me saying
Interesting.
to them, you can't have it all, but you
Hmm.
can have deep love and you can have a life, but you're going to have to compromise. And like I said, I think we've quit teaching compromise. I think we've gotten really good at giving everybody their own device and saying, go over here and do your thing. Like, people don't even have to watch the TV show together anymore. No one has to they don't have to, everybody has their own phone. And even at the dinner table, if you don't want to talk to us, everybody get your phone out and do your own thing. And so there's a connection there that we're losing. We're not teaching our children how to connect and stay connected.
What links both books for me is that they ask how a life becomes legible under pressure. Pressure from love, pressure from family, pressure from social expectation, pressure from ambition. And that brings me to your life as a teacher and as a reader. You come to fiction through education, reading, and a long engagement with literacy and literary life. I always find that meaningful because teaching reading is about much more than a skill. It's also about attention, interpretation, patience, and the ability to remain with complexity. How did your years as an educator shape the novelist you became?
Well, I will tell you that I didn't ever want to be a teacher. My mother was a teacher. And I should also tell you that I'm dyslexic. And so it took me I'm really good at math and history and learning things, but I really struggled to learn to read. And my mother was a reading specialist. And she would take an old film strip and put it on the wall until I built fluency and I learned. And I mean, thank heavens I was given a mother who knew exactly what I needed to give me the skills so I could go on and have the life that was planned for me and fated for me. So I mean, we talked earlier about some novels, but I remember the first book that stuck with me at such a cellular level that it's still with me today. And it was A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I was in the 8th grade. Now I was reading, but this is the first time, and I would have never got there without my mother. I'm going to tell you that right now. I would have never got there. And the character is gnawing on their hand. And I just remember thinking, wow, like so hungry. And even to this day, when I'm really hungry, I'll think I could gnaw on my finger. And I mean, because I realized books will stay in your soul forever. So from there, I learned to love to read and I loved books. And I went to college and I got a degree in English. And I had every intention of going to law school. That was the plan. I said that earlier. And so I didn't. I became a mother. Well, my middle son had severe learning disabilities. And when he started school, he was struggling and they were struggling to teach him. And so I started working with him at home. And I had a lot of friends who were homeschooling. And back then, homeschooling, for me, I think it's a great thing if that's what you want to homeschool. But for me, I wanted my children taught by a certified teacher because I saw in my own life having a mother who was a certified teacher, even though she taught me some things at home, she was skilled, she was trained. And without
Yes.
that training, I wouldn't have got it. So either I'm going to certify as a teacher, and if my son needs to be homeschooled, now he's going to be taught by a certified teacher. So that's how I got into education. So I start teaching. Luckily, he made it through school. It was fine. But what I discovered is this calling. To me, education's a calling. Just like ministers say they're called to what they're doing, I was called to education. And I ended up getting a master's in reading, administration, and gifted and talented.
Wow.
Should have got a doctorate, but I was so interested in all these other things. And you will find that a lot of the stuff shows up
Yes.
in the book from these master's degrees that I got. But so from there, when I start teaching, and you're right about the reading, I became such an avid reader. I read very, very quickly. I love reading. And so when I started teaching, I brought that love of reading and writing into the classroom. But I remembered how hard it was for me to learn to do that, especially the writing. And I told you I love math. So I decided to and I was teaching 6th grade, to make writing a formula. So what I did is I thought, they don't understand how to plan to write an essay or to write a short story. They think planning is brainstorming. So they'll get 50 ideas, but then they don't know what to do with the 50 ideas. So instead, I came up with this idea called the suitcase because I thought, you don't take snowshoes to the beach and you don't take a swimsuit to snow ski. And I wanted my students to know how to plan for their writing so they had everything. And I told you, I planned it out in my head before I ever write. So I drew this box and I put like a semicircle on the top. I called it was a suitcase. And I would
Uh-huh.
teach you can take a pair of jeans with 3 shirts and you can take a week trip. And then I would show them this is your main idea. This is your idea. And these are your jeans. That's your main idea. And then your top are your 3 things that go with it. And I would show them how your socks and your underwear, that's your grammar and your figurative language. And that your introduction, your conclusions are like your shoes. They're the same thing, but they're going in different directions. And I taught them to think that way. Okay. And I would take pieces, essays, and different things, and I would show them. Let's see how the author did that. Let's find the shoes in their introduction and conclusion. Let's find the main idea and the 3 pieces they supported it. And they were able to take that piece of understanding and begin to write. And it makes me so happy. And I'm not just saying this. I have people all the time that come to me and say, I still know how to write because you taught me that. Because once you get that concept down, that you have to have structure within your writing, you can't, if you jump into a vat of whipped cream, you're going to hit the floor. I mean, it can look pretty and it can smell good and it can feel soft and fluffy, but if there's no structure, you're going to hit. And so nothing holds water with good writing without structure. So teaching my kids to see it in writing and teaching how to see it in reading, for me, that became a real big passion, as you can tell. And I want people to be able to do that in my own writing. And you did it. You pulled out those structural pieces that hold my stories together. And I wanted my students to know how to do that.
That's fascinating. That's very great answer. And the details and the suitcase, actually, I wrote it down, so I'm going to look it up and learn more about it. At Reading the World, I'm always interested in literature as a way of making parts of reality more visible. Stories reveal things that ordinary discourse often simplifies or hides. So, I want to ask you, when you write fiction, what part of the world are you trying to help readers see more clearly?
Probably the three things that I realize, and they kind of emerge as the themes, overall themes of my writing. Number one, no one gets through life unscathed. You're going to have problems. I don't care how good a person you are. I don't care how hard you try. There are no perfect people, and you're going to hurt and be hurt. So when it's not how you go down, it's how you get up. So when you accept that, number one, that I'm going to have problems. How am I going to deal with it? Then you become proactive. So that's one of the things. Another of mine is it can always get worse. You cannot just lay down and think, this is it. This is the worst it can be. No, life can always be worse. So you have to find a way to be happy no matter what situation you're in. You have got to find peace and contentment within yourself to be happy. There's always something to be grateful for, and there's always something to be looking forward to, because this too shall pass. And so that's another theme. A third theme, and I think probably the most important theme, is that at the end of the day, all we take from this world is love. The love we make, the love we share, the relationships that we have. And it's how we love other people and ourselves. Because sometimes loving ourselves is the hardest one. Because if you don't love yourself, it's really hard to give love away. That is really, at the end of the day, all that matters. And we get so caught up in how society sees us ambition and our careers and our financial state and how we look and our social standing. We get so caught up in those things that we forget it's all going to go away. It's going to end. This too shall pass. I got to be okay with me. I got to make sure I love myself, and I've got to love and be the happiest I can possibly be in this moment with the people around me and share as much love with them as I can. Those would be, I would say, my message to the world and what I hope my books share to the world.
That's a beautiful place to end, because it brings us back to the deepest work of fiction. Not merely to tell a story, but to change how we see. Susan, thank you. This has
Thank you.
been such a pleasure.
Much thank you for the opportunity of letting me talk
Yes,
about my books. These are
absolutely.
my new babies is what I call them. I have my 3 older babies that are adults, and then I have, and I always tell people, be kind with me. You won't tell me my child is ugly. Don't tell me my book is ugly. And please
No,
go check out my books. And thank you so much for your insight into them, because I feel like I learned about my books talking to you.
I'm not done yet. I have the outro. So you have been listening to Reading the World. I'm Ali Al-Haji. My guest today was Susan Gooch, author of The Carrington Affairs and The Non-Negotiable. This was a conversation about small town as a social text, about secrecy and public life, about ambition and intimacy, and about the way fiction teaches us to read not only characters, but the worlds that shape them. Thank you for listening. And as always, read closely, listen carefully, and avoid the shortcuts.